Hello and welcome to the Friday, January 15th, 2020 edition of On Iowa Politics. We're 15 days into this new year. So far, it's not living up to my expectations.
That's your fault for having expectations.
Well,
That's right.
exactly. This week, the governor, the legislature, and impeachment. Talk about an unholy trinity. I'm James Lynch with the Cedar Rapids Gazette, and with me today are Tom Barton of the Quad City Times. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, James.
Amie Rivers of the Waterloo-Cedar Falls Courier. Good morning, Amie.
Good morning, James.
Erin Murphy, Newspapers Statehouse Bureau Chief. Good morning, Erin.
Good morning, James.
And Gazette Opinion Editor Todd Dorman. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning.
You can find us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to On Iowa Politics wherever you find your podcast. First up, the legislators are back. Ignoring health warnings about mass gatherings, the Iowa legislature has returned to the Iowa Capitol. In addition to the usual wrangling about school aid, tax cuts, and expanding gun rights, lawmakers appear to be gearing up to do battle over mask wearing. Mask or face coverings aren't required at the Capitol because although the legislature can force members to wear ties and jackets, GOP leaders say they can't enforce a mask mandate. And we know how Republicans dislike mandates, unless they like them. So, Erin, you've braved the front lines of the mask conflict. What does it look like at the Capitol?
Well, that first day especially, it looked very frightening because on top of the scene, as you kind of described it, with the mask recommended but optional, that option was being used by many. But on top of it, that first day, we got to celebrate the kickoff of the legislative session with a rally from people who were protesting mask wearing and other public health mandates. And so they packed into the Capitol hundreds at a time, shoulder to shoulder, not a one of them wearing masks. So that was made for an uneasy morning, to say the least. It's the thing that legitimately concerns me, and not even for myself, for other people, is this virus is still very much out there. Not wearing masks is proven to be a way to just enable this thing to spread even faster. And we've got a lot of folks in that building who are, older or have health conditions. I mean, we've already seen multiple, if I want to say even approaching a handful of state legislators across the country who have died from COVID after being exposed to it in the state capitol. We knew that before this session started, so that information was available, and the rules are still as lax as they are in the Iowa Capitol. So it's concerning, and it really is. And you can take all the precautions for folks who want to err on the side of caution, and I'm sure they are. I know I did, and will any days that I go back to the Capitol. But it's still kind of almost a literal game of Russian roulette that is being played at the Capitol right now.
And it was similar to the U.S. Capitol, right? When they had to, bog down with in their safe places with, other Republicans. Democrats have come out and said this is what's causing people to miss work and test positive for COVID was because they were in these rooms. So it's happening everywhere. You're totally right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And for me, it's been striking as I watch this, on the live stream. It's hard to get a good sense of how many people are wearing masks, but I've been surprised at how many lawmakers, including Republicans, are wearing face coverings. But that's offset, like you said, Erin, by elderly lawmakers who aren't wearing masks. And I mean, to me, like at the condition of the judiciary, everyone up there on the dais had a mask on, except the Senate President Jake Chapman. And watching committee meetings, I've noticed that nearly everyone in the room that I can see on the live stream has a mask, but not the chairman, who is sitting shoulder to shoulder with other members. And I mean, it just
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. And it calls into question the leadership of the GOP leaders who said they would strongly urge their members to wear masks. Well, it doesn't look like they're following the strong urging. Um,
Was that on this podcast last week when we made the My Cousin Vinny
yeah,
reference? Yeah. It kind of bears repeating. Or no, not My Cousin Vinny. A Few Good Men.
Good man. Yeah.
I object. Overruled. Well, I strongly object. Oh well, no. Well, let me think about it.
Well, it's like so much of the pandemic response overall that, you've got health experts on one side that are saying we need to do this list of things, but the policy is driven by kind of the nothing to see here folks, the people who don't think we should be doing much, we should be open, this is not a big deal. It's just amazing to watch how many policy decisions are just, tied to this minority view that it's, not a big deal. And at the Capitol, of course, it's the majority view because that's who controls the joint.
Exactly. But Amie, this battle over wearing masks may be over soon because lawmakers apparently are a priority population along with people with disabilities, correctional officers, teachers, and food production workers.
Yeah,
I wonder
that's right.
which one of these is not like the other.
Well, there's an argument to be made for the people that you elected to represent you and make the laws and make the budgets and make sure everything is still working at your state government level to be vaccinated. But that seems to fly in the face of the fact that a lot of them are simply, maybe not a lot of them, maybe just some of them are just simply disregarding basic health protocols. And I think people are right to say, why should you be a priority in the phase 1B, along with people over 75 years old, along with individuals with disabilities, along with people living in settings like prisons and congregate settings like shelters, when you're simply disregarding that, when you're saying, why should we wear them? Because it's not a big deal, let's roll the dice. But oh, by the way, please, let's get the vaccine quickly.
Yeah, I want to go to the front of the line. Yeah. As committee started meeting this week, minority Democrats offered amendments to the House rules to require face coverings in committee meetings for anybody that attends in person. Spoiler alert, they were not successful. The battle now appears to be moving to the actual adoption of House rules as soon as next week. However, House Majority Leader Matt Winchell said Thursday he hasn't scheduled that debate. It's sure to be interesting when even in committee and then when it gets to the floor, because I'm sure that there'll be a lot of amendments and a lot of discussion, which sort of as we're talking about this, and other than Erin, who has braved going into the Capitol, the rest of us are.
There's a fine line between brave and stupid.
Well, we know which side you're on.
I won't ask you to clarify that.
But all of this sort of drives home the importance of the legislature tackling the digital divide here in Iowa. And House Speaker Pat Grassley created an information technology committee, which ironically had technical challenges that left members participating remotely unable to join the discussion because they were trapped in a listen-only mode. Tom,
you can't make this stuff up.
What are the prospects for progress on that front?
I think they're good. This is a bipartisan issue. Both Republicans and Democrats have said that they intend to push forward additional funding and legislation to facilitate continued expansion of high-speed internet access across the state, with more and more Iowans working and learning from home and accessing medical care online. And Republicans who control the General Assembly, as well as the governor, have made clear that this is a priority. As you mentioned, House Speaker Pat Grassley established the new committee to examine broadband and cybersecurity issues and focus on state technology infrastructure. And again, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle have said broadband has been on their radar. And indeed, it was last session with lawmakers increasing the maximum grant amount available to service providers. But as Iowa House Speaker Grassley said, the pandemic has amplified the need to address gaps in broadband service and, quote, put them right in our face. And Governor Reynolds, in her condition of the state address, proposed $450 million in state funding over the next 4 years to achieve the goal of getting affordable high-speed broadband internet access to all corners of Iowa. The governor, in her speech, said, quote, "I'm done taking small steps and hoping for big change. This is the time for bold action and leadership. Let's plant a stake in the ground and declare that every part of Iowa will have affordable high-speed broadband by 2025. Whether lawmakers will fully jump on board and approve that large of an investment, I think remains up in the air. They've been reluctant in the years past to fully grant previous funding requests by the governor for broadband expansion grants in the state. And there are other Republican priorities, jockeying for attention and funding, but lawmakers seemed receptive to the governor's proposal. And there's added pressure on lawmakers from Iowans to seriously tackle the issue in a meaningful way as they've encountered issues and become dissatisfied with the level of service available in some areas of the state. And that has only been, magnified and compounded by the pandemic, with everything from schooling to work to doctor consultations and entertainment going virtually. And when they see neighbors in other communities that have high-speed service available and they don't, their frustration is just going to grow. So I think there is good prospects and good chance to see some progress on that front.
Yeah, the first committee meeting, that Information Technology Committee, there was a lot of talk about how basically there's a lot of agreement on this, and Representative Dave Williams from Cedar Falls compared it to sort of the rural electrification back in the 1930s, where reaching those hard to reach places, reaching the last miles, so everybody has high speed internet connections, and I, yeah, it's pretty clear talking to legislators that the pandemic has sort of heightened their awareness of this issue. Um,
I think it's become clear where in years past, some lawmakers may have seen high-speed broadband as maybe a luxury. This pandemic has definitely shown that it is in fact a necessity and needs to be viewed in light of the importance of other utilities. And you mentioned, electricity, for example. So I think that there is definitely going to be more of an impetus this session to try and get something passed and something a little bit more robust and substantial than some of the bills and the funding that have been passed in previous sessions.
Definitely, yeah. The $450 million for broadband was probably one of the highlights of Governor Kim Reynolds' annual condition of the state speech that she delivered Tuesday night. It was the most unusual condition of the state address I've seen in more than 20 years of covering the legislature. Typically, I would have been watching from the press bench. The House chamber and galleries would have been packed. There would have been some degree of pomp and much more applause and standing ovations, at least from the governor's party. Reynolds' slow wooden delivery didn't help her speech. But Todd, if Reynolds gets poor marks for delivery, how do you grade the content? But first, I have to say I was surprised the governor didn't mention you in her condition of the state speech or invite you to the speech, perhaps a seat next to the maskless Senator Chapman.
Yeah, that would have been that would have been very nice. I would have been honored, frankly. But yeah, the speech was, it had its good points. We just talked about broadband. I mean, she talked about the need to address the shortage of childcare in the state and to look at ways to build the workforce and affordable housing. And she wants to ban racial profiling by police. And there was some talk of rural health care needing some help and mental health funding. Excuse me, all good areas. But on the flip side, she mentioned this racial profiling ban, but then also talked about enhanced penalties for rioters that, might assault a police officer. I mean, there are already good laws on the books that address that. This sounds more to me like she's playing to the part of her party that, sees the Black Lives Matter protests as somehow equivalent to the folks storming the Capitol, hoping to lynch the vice president. So I don't see that as being very comparable, but that's, it's her speech. She also she also had a lot of praise for, individual public schools that did these great things, but sort of the thanks they got then, the public schools, what was this? She's going to take away she's going to force them to allow all students to leave via open enrollment if they, without, limits. There's a handful of districts that have sort of diversity plans that try to keep higher income students from abandoning the district, leaving it with just, kids that are getting free and reduced lunch. She wants to allow people to take, state funded vouchers to pay for private school, which has been a controversial topic for a long time, and it's been floated in the past. And it feels like she's using the pandemic as sort of a pretext for something that they haven't been able to get done in the past. Uh, and also she, talked about charter schools, which might not be too bad. We have to see the details of that. And but I sort of aside from the public school stuff and this enhancement of penalties against people rioting, I think on balance there's some stuff to work with that could actually be done in a bipartisan manner. But uh, you know, as we've seen in the past, sometimes her bipartisan message at the beginning of a session kind of takes a back seat soon to far more partisan issues.
Yeah. The one thing that I found interesting is that many of her priorities, broadband, increased funding for mental health, um, uh, and housing and childcare are issues that typically we wouldn't think of as Republican issues, but Republicans really have at least offered some proposals in recent years on those. I mean, the House has passed a child care tax credit program and has a number of proposals, for employers who provide child care at their facilities, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
That
Well, and I think, Jim,
got.
sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
don't mean to interrupt, but just to put a quick pin on that note, I think what's happening here is, and I don't mean to sound cynical, but there's plenty of evidence to support my cynicism, is that's happening because you're seeing more and more businesses get behind those kinds of issues, and they're talking about
Mhm.
needing their workforce, and those kinds of things are keeping people out of the workforces. So businesses and the types of groups and organizations that typically support Republicans in elections are starting to push those issues, which is why they're starting to show up in the Republican agenda now in lawmaking.
Exactly. These are coming from the bottom up. It's not so much a
Right.
leadership from the top down, but I mean, I think you're absolutely right that businesses are saying they need to expand the workforce. They need to be able to have people, especially women with children, get them back into the workforce, those sorts of things. And so they need childcare. The workforce housing issue, it seems to be especially driven by people in some of the smaller communities around the state where, they say that there hasn't been a house built in 10 years, or an apartment building. I think that was the example the governor used in some community where there hadn't been an apartment building built forever. Um, so it's sort of interesting to watch how these are coming up. Uh, and like you said, Aaron, from, the people who typically support Republicans, um, that were there other highlights or lowlights people heard in this speech? We've talked about some of the governor's priorities. Were there things that weren't mentioned that people found interesting?
I just and not to sound all media groupthink here, but I kind of agree with the discussion, and more broadly the way I came out of it. My reaction was it was interesting to hear both some things that some issues, as we've talked about, that should and probably will have a lot of bipartisan support behind them, and then also sprinkled in some topics that are going to very much drive a partisan wedge through the state house. So it was kind of an interesting, to me anyways, an interesting mix of both of those kinds of topics. I know Democrats wanted to hear more about the pandemic and the state's response. But that was kind of my 35,000 foot view of things.
In a lot of ways, this is the kickoff of the governor's reelection campaign. It's not intended to be a political speech, but it is sort of like the starting gate. How did this sound in terms of building a reelection campaign? Was this a good start, or?
Yeah, that's a good way, and we could loop in last year's condition of the state address into that discussion a little bit too, because she made the big pitch with the Invest in Iowa proposal that lowered taxes, shifted mental health funding to the state, and to put money into water quality projects. So a really big proposal that had little pieces in it that a lot of different people will like. That's something she'll be able to take out of on the campaign and say, here's issues that I talked about and I proposed and I pushed for, and then this year's address kind of adds to that list. So I think you're absolutely right that that's a good way to look at that. And again, apologies for being cynical, but the cynic view of it could be that that's really the only reason that those issues were in there, that maybe they were pie in the sky type proposals, but they're the kinds of things that if you put in a condition of the state address, you can go out on the campaign trail and tell people, a whole lot of people who like any number of those issues, that you have proposed those things.
Erin, do you think it matters if the legislature actually takes up any of her proposals? Because, I mean, as we're seeing in the beginning of the legislature right now, they're taking proposals that she never mentioned, like a new death penalty for, someone that, kidnaps and kills a minor, or, the gay panic defense, which arguably doesn't need to be a law since it's already not really being used around here. Is that mattering to her?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a good question. And from the campaign standpoint, the answer is no. I mean, it would be a bigger feather in her cap if she got one of these things, to her desk and signed into law, sure. But as long as you've made the public statement, you can go out on the campaign trail and say, hey, I've been trying, talk to those lawmakers. They're the reason it hasn't gotten done. But I told them these are the things I want.
Is it she's got the Republican majority? Is that a factor too? Because if she didn't, obviously she could say, well, I tried. But does the well, I tried thing fly when she's got majorities in both houses?
That's a really good question. And my answer might be different than the average, reader, voter. Because my view of it is that is a fair point to make, an easy thing to say, but also these are really unique Republican caucuses, even separate from themselves, much less there any differences they might have with the governor. So on paper, yes, that is a fair question. But boy, if you've covered these two Republican caucuses at all, that while they agree on a lot of things, there is plenty in which that they don't see eye to eye, that does get in the way of a number of these types of things.
I was just wondering if she's going to have a primary challenge because of that.
That could happen. I've heard mumbling about that, but it seems, I'm not sure where the primary challenge would come from, and it doesn't seem like it would be successful, at least from what
That's what I was just going to say. Yeah, there's a difference between a primary challenge and a serious primary challenge.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
sure.
think it does put the governor in a situation where it makes it harder running for re-election when she has the majority, Republican majority in both the Senate and the House. If she can't get them to go along with her, It's not like she can go out and say, "Hey, give me a majority and I can get these things done." It's like you have a majority and you can't get these things done. So I think it does make it harder for her in that sense. Um, Fortunately, I think from her standpoint, she's sort of laying out an agenda that the Republicans should be able to get behind. Maybe not give her $450 million for broadband. The Republican method seems to be they'll give her 15 million this year and promise 15 or 150 million the next year, etc. And then uh, they'll see a shiny object next year and move on to something else. But it, she's laid out an agenda that they should be able to get behind and give her at least a half a loaf, and go out and campaign on. As we've talked about before, she didn't mention her Invest in Iowa plan that was the centerpiece last year. And now that doesn't seem to be on her agenda, or at least high on the agenda. So, that's already sort of a casualty of not being able to bring Republicans along with her. Speaking of whether or not you can bring Republicans along with you, let's move to Congress, where Republicans are going to be asked to impeach their president, our president.
Segway Hall of Fame right there.
There we go. Yeah, Donald Trump's historical presidency is nearing its end, but Democrats seem intent on letting him not get away. The House Democrats and a handful of Republicans made Trump the first president in history to be impeached twice. That seems like the kind of winning that even Trump could get tired of.
Wow.
There remain many questions as to whether the Senate will conduct a trial or even whether it can hear the case for impeachment once Trump leaves office. Something tells me the new Senate Democratic majority won't let that stand in their way. Todd, over the past 4 years, we've used a lot of terms like unconventional, unusual, norm busting, atypical, unorthodox, and bizarre to describe this president. So is this a fitting way for Trump to go out?
Yeah, it's a fitting way for him to go out based on the list that you read. It's going to be interesting to see going forward how this is received, in the public as far as impeaching him, trying him after he's out of office. Although I think the goal is to, keep him from holding public office again, which I think a fair slice of America would be pretty much in favor of. So, it's unusual. It's norm breaking. It's unconventional. It's norm busting, as you say, and it's definitely going to be something that this is a memorable presidency, both for all the things that happened and also so that we don't ever let it happen again. And that's so I guess in that vein, if we decide not to elect another reality TV star as our president, that would probably be a good result from all this. And no more Trumps, maybe. I mean, if Donald can't run, I think we should take, the impeachment should apply to the whole family. It should just be Don Jr., Eric,
Hey.
Ivanka.
Whole family line.
But Barron, Barron, you got to give him a chance. He's just a kid,
That's right.
Barron, I suppose we could make an exception.
I mean, who wouldn't vote for a president named Barron?
Good point.
I mean, I remember when Republicans were the family values party, and there's a family without a lot of values, so maybe they could just take them all out.
Yeah, it's interesting that the Republican argument against impeachment is that this just further divides the country, that fans the flames of all this division. The one thing that you touched on, Todd, that I think maybe Republicans might go along with is the idea that this will prevent Trump from ever running again, because there is that fear that in 2024 he might mount a campaign and run for president again.
Yeah, well, there was a poll out this week that showed him a GOP primary poll for
Yeah.
2024 that showed him pretty far ahead. So, I mean, of course, that's ridiculously early, and all the other things that you say about an early poll. But I mean, he's going to be a political force especially if he can still run again, if he can still dangle that possibility out there. I mean, he's got a constituency. As far as dividing the country, I mean, we just watched the Capitol being invaded. How much more divided can it really get? I mean,
Ooh, don't jinx us.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, I mean, an entire, I don't know what percentage of the country thinks the last election was stolen. I don't know that impeaching the president is going to, or not impeaching the president is going to make that any better.
Yeah, they're not going to go away.
It's a significant percentage of people that think that. That's scary.
But I mean, it seems like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and some of those folks are going to vote for impeachment just to clear the field, so Trump isn't eligible in 4 years.
Yeah, those guys.
So keep an eye on those folks when it's time to vote.
Of course, that's good advice, just generally speaking, too.
Well, yeah, yeah,
Keep an eye on those folks.
Keep an eye on all of them. Well, that's it for this edition of On Iowa Politics. I hope it was worth your time. If you like it, tell a friend and subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you find your podcast. And send fan mail to podcast@thegazette.com. You can find us on the homepages of the Quad City Times, Sioux City Journal, Muscatine Journal, Mason City Globe Gazette, Waterloo-Cedar Falls Courier, and the Cedar Rapids Gazette. Porch Builder will take us out. If you know an Iowa band or musician who should be on our show, send us a sound file and subscribe to On Iowa Politics on iTunes and Stitcher. For Amie, Tom, Erin, Todd, and our producer, Stephen, I'm James Lynch. Thanks for listening. Stay well.